Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock. They're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can choose. Even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other. Peace out and word to your mother. They're from the best decades. Movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun. Action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions free. Come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast.
It is the 30-something movie podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Reed. I am here with my fellow soldiers. We are in the Double D classroom. I don't feel like we belong in the Double D classroom, but that's where we are. I've got some of my regulars here, but we also have a special guest on this episode as well. So special guest will go first. Addie, and here's where I'm going to show that I have the memory of a goldfish, because I did ask you before we started recording how you pronounce your last name, and I've already forgotten. Is it Iacchino?
It's Iacchino, so if you put like a Y, it's Italian.
Iacchino, there we go.
I should have, but you know.
Although, Pat, isn't yours? I thought yours was the pronunciation.
Cantagallo.
Oh, okay.
It works the same way in Spanish and Italian, but yeah, it's Cantagallo.
That works. So, Addie, we're super excited to have you here with us.
Yes,
you
welcome.
have joined us as one of our Patreon co-executive producers. You and I were chatting a little while ago, and you were wanting to join us for an episode. I sent out the list, and you immediately responded back with Renaissance Man. So can you tell, what was it about Renaissance Man when you saw that one on the list? You're like, that's the one I got to jump on.
Oh, I grew up watching that one. I've seen it so many times. And there was like Ace Ventura and all that on the list, but I'm like, that's too easy. Let me just pick something else. So I went with Renaissance Man.
Nice. All right, so we'll get into it a little bit further with this one. And then you've already heard Pat. How you doing, Pat?
Doing well, everybody. So excited to be back talking movies. It feels like it's been a while.
It does.
And so great to welcome a guest. Addie, it's going to be great to talk movies with you.
And then Bo Warmbold, how are you doing?
I'm well, John. How are you?
You sound calm and smooth.
I'm trying.
Okay. Did you even go to work today?
Were you not at work?
No, I was.
Okay. All right.
I've tried to leave the work behind and do a cleansing drive home.
Uh-huh.
Good for you.
Okay.
Is it like Spinal Tap? You'd be more fired up if you weren't under such heavy sedation?
It's okay. All right. That makes sense. So before we get going talking about the movie, Addie, do you want to tell us a little bit about you? What's your background with movies? Are you just a big movie fan? And I guess another question would be, how did you find us and how did you tolerate us after listening to a couple minutes?
Big questions. I've always liked movies. I'm from Canada, just outside of Toronto. I'm going to be 34 soon. And I've always loved movies. I was like a weird kid who would be 8 or 9 years old and watch all of these movies like The Man in the Iron Mask because I wanted to watch Leonardo DiCaprio. I've always been into movies. And then your podcast, I think I found a couple of years ago, just when looking for something to listen to. And you guys are awesome, so I listen to you all the time. I'm still binging like a lot of your episodes.
We do have a few in the back catalog, and you're in good company too, because as I've mentioned plenty of times on the show, I was the weird 5-year-old that loved Amadeus. So you're in good company with people who probably enjoy movies they shouldn't enjoy at a young age.
For sure,
Definitely.
Awesome.
And now you said you're up in Canada, right?
yeah.
Now, I might be way off with dates, but was the Canadian Thanksgiving about this time? Or am I way off? It was yesterday.
No, it was yesterday.
Okay, depending on when this gets released and all that. Well, it was just, we've got Canadian friends and they always send that out. And, we wish each other the happy holidays. So happy Thanksgiving, Addie.
Thank you.
check out the big brain on Pat.
Just stop.
Pat, you're my hero.
Oh, geez.
Can I call you a celebrity?
No,
Okay.
we're not going there. We have a guest, guys. We got to, suck it in. We're the Ghostbusters.
Hey, I started this episode wearing a suit.
That's right. Hey, John, you're the
I
host.
think
You do
really
whatever
just
you
threw me
want.
a line. It just sort of doesn't. I know you do it. It just doesn't make sense.
I took the jacket off. Just calm down, Bo. Take whatever you were using to sedate yourself earlier and just calm down, okay? Can you send some this direction as well? Whatever you used on the ride home that made you so calm, please send more. Yes, have some, is what I'm saying. All right. We spoil here. As we're talking, we may mention other movies. If you hear the name of a movie and you want nothing to do with it because you haven't watched it yet or you don't like it, feel free to just hit that skip button on your podcast app a couple of times so we can move on past. And usually we've got it out of our system within about 20, 30 seconds or so. Make sure you visit our website if you haven't already, 30podcast.com. You can leave a rating, a voicemail. You can also become a co-executive producer via Patreon and join us for an episode. Or just give us a hard time by also telling Pat what movies he should watch.
Exactly. I
feel
suppose that's the question now that we've got Addie here. And Addie, by the way, thank you for your kind words and for checking us out. That's so meaningful, and the support and all of those things. But I do need to ask, because there is a curse. Have I insulted any of your favorite movies on episodes? Because if so, I just want to apologize before we get too far into recording this one.
I can't remember. So my favorite movie is Newsies, which, yes, I know it's not the best. My post right behind me. I don't remember what you said because I listened to that like 2 years ago.
Okay.
As long as you didn't insult that,
No, I try not to yuck other people's yums. I remember liking that one. So anyways, that's good. It just seems like there's been a curse with the guests and Patreons and all that kind of stuff that like, they'll be like, hey, here are the favorite movies. And those are the ones that I took a pass at. So anyways, that's good. John, Bo, I think we might be breaking the curse.
That's I thought Addie said, I broke up for just a second. I thought she said her favorite movie was Blue Velvet.
Okay, well, I don't think that's what she said.
But Pat's willing.
I'm willing to work with you. There's a middle ground. We can find it.
Pat, in improv, you're just supposed to yes and it.
And I love all of you.
There we go. There we go. I think we're going to be in good company here with Addie because I'm spotting behind you on your video. You've got a couple of posters on the wall, and you've got a pillow that says "Never Grow Up," and we haven't. So I think we're all in good company here. All right. For this one, let's see, we'll go ahead and get started on the release date for this one. June 3rd, 1994, rated PG-13 with a runtime of 2 hours and 8 minutes, directed by Penny Marshall, who did Big and A League of Their Own. Writer was Jim Bernstein, who did Love and Honor and Ruffian. Producers were Sarah Culleton, who did the Dexter TV show and The Painted Veil. Elliot Abbott did A League of Their Own and Awakenings. Composer was Hans Zimmer, who did The Lion King and Inception. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg did Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Ghost. Editor was George Bowers, who did A League of Their Own and Sleeping with the Enemy. Production company is Touchstone Pictures. Budget $40 million, box office $24 million, so did not make back its production budget. Flickmetrics gives this one a 58%, and CinemaScore gives it an A-. Before we get too much further, the one that I think really, really surprised me was the Rotten Tomatoes score for this one. I don't typically look at Rotten Tomatoes because I think sometimes they're off the wall crazy. If I remember correctly, I believe this one had a 12% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Ooh, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
I saw that before watching the movie, and I know I've only seen this movie maybe once. I remember seeing it in the theater. I don't remember if I watched it again after seeing it in the theater. I remember enjoying it. So when I looked at that and I saw, whoa, 12%? Like, did I miss something? I would have seen this in the theater. I would have been like 14 years old when I saw it in the theater. Maybe 14-year-old didn't really understand what he was watching, and maybe it was worse than I thought. And my wife and I watched this just the other day, and I was like, that's not a 12% movie.
No, I agree, because I saw those and I was really surprised by seeing those scores. So I started reading the critics' reviews and I read Roger Ebert's review, and I was kind of like, did we watch the same movie? Like, it really took me by surprise. But now you mentioned the Flick metric score is pretty high. So, yeah, I found some of the reviews and all that most curious.
Yeah. Now, Addie, first time you would have seen this, would you have rented it and watched it at home?
I think we have the VHS somewhere. I remember watching that when it came out. I was 4, so obviously not in theaters. I know my sister watched it, so yeah, as a kid on VHS, and then I remember specifically watching it when I was a teenager and being shocked that it was Mark Wahlberg.
Okay, yeah.
I had forgotten about the young Marky Mark. When he walked on screen, I was like, dang!
Marky Mark and the Double D Bunch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if he had anything to do with the rap.
Was he doing the song that they played over the end credits?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got that here in the trivia. The end credits feature the song United by Prince, Ital Joe, and Marky Mark. So he had some music. I just about guarantee he was probably involved in the Shakespeare rap, which is
So
awesome.
one thing I meant to look up, and I'm just going to ask this because I have a hunch you might have already done this.
Ask away.
Was this his first movie?
This was Mark Wahlberg's first movie.
That's what I thought.
Might have been first acting role anywhere, like movie, TV.
Mm,
At the very-
yeah, I would imagine that.
Yeah.
Because he is so young.
Yes, babyface.
I mean, obviously you had New Kids on the Block, but that doesn't really count.
So in this one, we've got Danny DeVito as Bill Rago. I think there should be a little bit of a twins connection here because, I don't know, Danny DeVito in another twins movie with Ivan Drago, I think would be fun. Bill Rago, Ivan Drago. No, I feel like he should be a boxer. Something about that name just makes me think he should be like a scrappy fighter or something.
can
Danny
see
DeVito
that.
was in Batman Returns and Get Shorty. Gregory Hines, who passed away in 2003, was Sergeant Cass. He was in History of the World Part 1, Running Scared, and one of my favorite movies of all time, The Muppets Take Manhattan. He was the Central Park roller skater with Miss Piggy. Yeah. James Remar played Captain Tom Murdoch. He was in 48 Hours and The Warriors. Cliff Robertson, who passed in 2011, played Colonel James. He was in Charlie and Spider-Man. Kadeem Harrison was Private Jamal Montgomery. He was in White Men Can't Jump and the TV show A Different World. Stacey Dash was Private Miranda Myers. She was in Clueless and Mo Money. Lilo Bracanto Jr. was Private Donnie Benitez. He was in A Bronx Tale and Crimson Tide. Mark Wahlberg was Private Tommy Lee Hayward. He was in The Fighter and Boogie Nights. Richard T. Jones was Private Jackson Leroy. He was in The Wood and Event Horizon. Peter Simmons played Private Brian Davis. He was in Casualties of War and Tiger Warsaw. Khalil Kane was Private Roosevelt Nathaniel Hobbs. He was in Juice and Love Jones. Ed Begley Jr. was Jack Markin. He was in St. Elsewhere, the TV show, and This is Spinal Tap. Some trivia related to this one is the role of Sergeant Cass was originally offered to Ving Rhames, who did turn it down to take a part specifically written for him in Pulp Fiction. That's Marcellus Wallace.
Art house picture.
You know. The role ultimately went to Gregory Hines, but Penny Marshall felt Hines was still maybe a little bit too nice when he was yelling at the troops. There are a few times in the movie where I'm like, this is the nicest group of drill sergeants. This military might have been one that I'd be like, wouldn't mind getting yelled at just a little bit by those guys. They're so nice.
Mm-hmm.
As we mentioned before, this was Mark Wahlberg's debut. Even though it says it's at Fort McLean, Michigan, that is a fictional fort. It was actually shot at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. If you knew or memorized military bases, mottos, and landmarks, you would have known that this was Fort Jackson in South Carolina. Mark Wahlberg's character is mocked a couple of times by the other characters for having no rhythm, but ironically, he was a professional rapper known as Marky Mark. Private Benitez almost perfectly recites the famous St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. Does end up leaving out, I believe, one minor line from it, but I did. As I was sitting there listening to it, I had a tombstone moment when he was finishing it off. He finishes off with the line, and they will hold their manhoods cheap for those who fought with us on St. Crispin's Day. And I wanted to pull out my revolver, fire it in the air, and say, that's our kind of stuff, Curly Bill style. But everything's a connection to Tombstone.
You know, it's funny. I recalled it was Major Dick Winters, and I heard what you're saying. I thought of Tombstone, but then for some reason that speech made me think of Dick Winters talking at the end of the Band of Brothers documentary, and he quotes that as well. Obviously, a slightly different setting and emotional impact, but that scene really got me when he started quoting that, the Band of Brothers section in this movie. It was pretty cool.
Well, and that speech being the line where you get the phrase Band of Brothers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's see. There's a World Series connection here. When Bill takes his daughter to a Tigers game, the opposing team is the Toronto Blue Jays, who went on to win the 1993 World Series.
Yay!
There you go. There you go. Another Toronto connection. And we mentioned earlier the end credits feature a song "United" by Marky Mark. That was the rap name of Mark Wahlberg. Addie, you've seen this movie a bunch of times. Do you know any other trivia that we didn't catch here?
I always read the IMDb trivia when I watch some things. I just read this, but I think you covered it all. Mark Wahlberg or Marky Mark, whatever. He did another song on the soundtrack. I think when Hobbs was getting arrested.
Yes.
Or it was like yeah, I know he did another song.
It sounded, that song when he was getting arrested did sound like Marky Mark's voice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Quick synopsis for this one, then we'll run down some major moments. We'll play the trailer audio for you and then run down some major moments so that we can review the movie for you in case you haven't seen it recently. In a world where discipline is the law, one man breaks the rules. Bill Rago is an out-of-work ad executive forced to teach a group of misfit Army recruits. Ultimately, they'll learn more than Shakespeare. They'll discover what it means to fight for something greater.
The Army wanted to make them into soldiers.
Eat now, we taste them later. Yes, your soldier!
Bill Rago
I've never taught before, and you've never thought before.
wanted to open their mind.
This is Hamlet.
I think you're wasting my time.
Your time?
Their time is my time, Bill.
Touchstone Pictures presents Danny DeVito in a Penny Marshall film,
Talk about anal. You must have been toilet trained at gunpoint.
Oh, that's it. That is it.
Renaissance Man.
I feel like having gone to see it in the theater, I would have watched the trailer, and that would have gotten me to... Because I went to go see it by myself. And at age 14, I don't know that I was going to a bunch of movies by myself, but I think I specifically asked to be driven to the movie theater so I could go see this one.
You were flexing your independence.
Might have been. It was that, and it was probably Shakespeare. It was a nerdy little 14-year-old.
No.
All right, major moments for this one. 10 major moments. We've taken the plot and we've run it through a combination of a steamroller and a pasta maker. We give you 10 major moments. We break it down for you to save you a little bit of time.
Essentially, folks, this is John AI.
This is John taking his thoughts, putting it through. No, it is not.
I said, John AI, you do the work.
Oh, I do the work. You're saying I'm the AI.
Yeah.
So you're saying I'm not human. Let's not fight. We have a guest.
So we'll call it John Intelligence then. How about that? Is
Yes.
that better?
Yeah, John Intelligence. That works better. We're going to make it available 3 weeks after the podcast is released.
Excellent. Says the former Apple employee.
Yes, I know. But
I'm just saying, Addie, we don't normally record this early, so we're more awake. I think it's more lively bunch tonight.
We're a little feisty, that's for sure.
Everyone's a little feisty. That's true.
Let me correct you there. Bo and I are usually awake.
That's true. I'm usually asleep.
I wanted to clarify that because sometimes when I do editing, I set it out when you fall asleep. Sometimes I don't because I think it's good comedy.
Yes. Gremlins 2, Addie. You should check out our recording of Gremlins 2.
That was a fun one.
It was decent.
Yeah.
All right.
So Bill Rago.
Is the one where you fell asleep?
Yes. Is that the most famous one where you fell asleep?
That was the famous one.
I think that was the one where John's commenting and I say something like, John, Pat has left the building.
That's where I snore.
We're throwing it over to you, Pat.
And then I wake up and I was sleep talking. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. So Gremlins 2 Electric Boogaloo was a great movie. This is the first time, I think, really, that Robert Downey Jr. was a great...
Well, I want to say, I was like, guys, hey, Pat, I had some tech difficulties or something. And you were just like, well, that or you fell asleep. And I was like, really? Did I really? It's pretty priceless. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Pat got incepted and didn't even know it.
Yeah, that much is certain.
Somebody kick his chair and he'll wake up. Bill Rago, a divorced advertising executive from Detroit, loses his job, struggles to find a new purpose here. His failure in his career leaves him demoralized, but he's soon assigned to a temporary job teaching basic literacy at Fort McLean, an Army training base. Before we move on from this initial opening scenes, you've got the scenes of the city. I'm stuck in traffic. The one thing that I kind of laughed at was he can't make it to the meeting right now. We're going to try something brand new and modern. we're going to put him on speakerphone. Just wait roughly 25 years, and this will all be commonplace.
Never be late to a meeting again.
Or never show up to a meeting ever again.
But you can show up from exotic locales.
That is true. He could have. See, that would have been the fun thing. If he'd had the Zoom call, he would have shown up from the exotic locale of, look, I'm in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Delaware. Initially unenthusiastic about the teaching assignment, Bill faces some challenges connecting with a group of semi-literate and uninterested Army recruits, the Double D Squad. This 6-week timeline to teach basic English comprehension puts some pressure on him, and he's kind of unable to catch their interest at first. His first attempts at traditional teaching fail miserably. So at least at this point in the movie, we're not really Dead Poets Societying this. This is more of a stand and deliver. Maybe like the first 20 minutes of stand and deliver kind of a situation going on here. Nobody has sounded their barbaric yelp at this point. If he had just had them stand on the desks, it would have all been different.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
Thank you. And in the military, that actually means something.
It does.
Desperate to engage his students, Bill turns to his favorite play, Hamlet. The soldiers are unfamiliar with both the play and the concept of theater, but Bill assigns roles to each student and begins to read Hamlet aloud in class. This new approach generates a small spark of interest among the recruits. I remember seeing the movie and thinking that this part was kind of funny because we had just moved back from England. As a middle schooler, I went to an all-boys school in England, and I very vividly remember that when we would read Shakespeare plays, the parts got divvied up and all the boys got all the parts. I remember almost the exact same conversation taking place in my middle school classes. Lady Macbeth, are you sure? Yeah, that's how it was. That's how Shakespeare did it. Sure. That's how we're doing it. It made it a little awkward when we ended up doing the school plays and chose to do Alice in Wonderland. And then the question was, wait a minute, we're an all-boys school. Who's playing Alice?
That seems like an interesting choice you made there.
And then, I'll tell you how things got even more interesting. The night of our first performance, Alice showed up with his wig on, and a bunch of the other boys were like, hey, is that somebody's sister? She's kind of cute.
No.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
It got awkward fast because it was right around that time that Alice's voice had started to drop as well. So not a great time for the play. Then he turned around, guys, it's me. I was like, whoa, okay.
Guys. Not funny, guys.
Right.
They're thinking, no, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I remembered enough to tell it, 30 years later. To deepen their connection to Billy Shakespeare, Billy Rago decides to take them on a field trip to Stratford, Ontario to see a live performance by Shakespearean actors. This kind of opens their eyes to the power of literature, to the power of the stage, and they're also introduced to Shakespeare's Henry V during this trip, so that kind of expands their cultural and intellectual horizons as well. Paralleling his work with the soldiers, Bill then starts to try and reconnect with his estranged daughter. Earlier in the movie, she had said, I love astronomy. I want to go to Mexico. I want to be able to see this thing in Mexico. That's the best place to see it. And he picks on her a little bit. He's like, come on, get a real job. He realizes that he should have just let her be what she wanted to be. So he buys her a plane ticket to Mexico and a very nice telescope. In fact, I remember this as a kid. I was also, when I lived over in England, also kind of obsessed with astronomy. I remember I had a subscription to the Astronomy Now magazine in England. So take it, whatever you think of me in terms of nerd cred. I saw this telescope that she had in the movie. I was like, man, that is like the same one that I always wanted. It was in all the ads in Astronomy Now. And I was like, that is a really nice telescope. I want Danny DeVito to be my dad. So she gets the plane ticket to Mexico. She gets the telescope, and he's now encouraging her interest in astronomy. This kind of is spotlighting his growth as he's starting to mend some of the broken relationships in his own personal life. Despite some of this progress, Drill Sergeant Cass, played by Gregory Hines, remains pretty skeptical of his teaching methods and the recruits' abilities. And he is basically like, nope, strict discipline. That's what's going to get him through. Teaching Shakespeare is not going to change anything about them. And so you've got some little arguments here and there during this part of the movie between the drill sergeant and Bill. One of the soldiers, I kind of forgot this part of the movie, having only seen it roughly 30 years ago, completely forgot that we take a sharp left turn in the movie when Private Hobbs is revealed to be a drug dealer hiding under a false identity, or that he dealt drugs earlier in his life, not that he still is. That kind of surprised me a bit because we're going along. I'm like, yeah, this is like it's like a military version of Dead Poet Society. This is one of those inspiring, like all the students are going to succeed. And then we take this sharp left turn. It's like, wait a minute. No, he's gone. He's not in the movie anymore. We'll get a little scene later on where he writes him a letter, but that was a sharp turn from what I recalled. We're not going back from this because there's not going to be some dramatic scene where they storm the courtroom and give them evidence as to why he should be released. It's like, nope, this is what he did, and he's going to have to deal with the consequences. That was surprising. So he's removed, obviously, from the program, sent to prison, but does later write that letter to him explaining how that's inspired him to try to do better. Hobbs ends up reading Othello in prison and expresses his hope to take some college classes after getting released, and showing that he's had a lasting impact on these cadets. During a grueling night exercise in a rainstorm, Private Donnie Benitez, on a dare from Sergeant Cass, recites the famous St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V while in full combat gear. This performance impresses not just his fellow recruits, but also the hardened Sergeant Cass himself, who starts to see some of the value in Rago's unconventional teaching methods here. Rago sets an oral exam as the final test for his class, and it's a challenge to the soldiers that they can rise to with some surprising success, because they get told basically if you take this and you pass it, you get an attaboy or an attagirl. If you fail this, you are done. You are out of the military, you're done. And pretty much all of them have told us in some impassioned speeches and descriptions earlier in the movie, they've, in Richard Gere style, they got nowhere else to go. So they kind of need to be here. So that's taking a big risk for them to take this test. Contrary to expectations, they pass the exam with flying colors. Rago uncovers some information that leads to Private Brian Davis receiving his father's Silver Star Medal that he would have earned in Vietnam. That's this really nice scene during their graduation ceremony. At the graduation parade, Rago is saluted by the soldiers, who have been transformed by this journey with him to newfound confidence. And then, having successfully helped them pass their class, he decides to continue teaching at Fort McLean. It's no longer just a 6-week position for him. He's making it permanent. This is his personal and professional redemption. It ends on a hopeful note as he and his students have grown from their shared experiences, and we are seeing a whole new batch of cadets coming on through in their plain clothes, and we know that there will be another group for him to teach. So that is the 10 major moments from the movie. Kind of sum everything up for us. Is there anything you feel like I missed? Are there any scenes in particular that you're like, oh, this I love this one, you didn't quite cover this one? Anything that I missed?
Hey, Eddie, go ahead. I don't want to cut across you. Please, guests first.
Okay. My entire Google thing gave out for a little bit, so I was gone for like a minute. So I missed your whole thing. But okay. Things that you missed. I don't think you missed anything. I took notes because nerd as well. But yeah, no, I think you covered everything. It's just more of my thoughts of how he inspired them and changed them for the better, but they also changed him for the better.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into deep thoughts. We'll go a little deeper.
If I can throw one thing before the
go
deep
for it.
thoughts, there's one scene that I really liked, and it was when he started picking up a fight with the sergeant. The colonel was like, he would have killed you. He would have been court-martialed, but he would have killed you. And he says, have you ever served in the military? I thought this part was so well done, and I just wanted to highlight that. And it's when Danny DeVito says, no, my military service was, marching from the Capitol to Arlington Cemetery, carrying the name of a soldier. And then the colonel just looks and says, do you remember the soldier's name? Danny DeVito has incredible eyes, right? And how he uses them, it's typically comedic. But man, that point when you just see his gaze hollow out and he realizes, no, I don't. I just thought that was such a powerful scene of understanding. In a movie that's fun and lighthearted, I thought that was a pretty powerful scene. So,
yeah. All right, let's dive a little deeper.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
I have an opinion on this matter.
Don't mince words, Bones. What do you really think?
I like it a lot.
Wow. It's very deep. Thank you.
All right. So in terms of deep thoughts, when was the first time you remember seeing this movie? And in general, before we even get into the deep thoughts, did you like it? I saw this one in the theater when it came out. Liked it then, liked it now. You know, it's so similar to other movies that inspired me to want to be a teacher. It's along the same lines of the, Dead Poets Society and so many other movies that are like that. I think that would be a very fulfilling job, even if sometimes it could be a thankless job. There's plenty about that seems very fulfilling. If you can reach a group of students, especially with Shakespeare, that could be a pretty cool job. I enjoyed this one when I saw it. I enjoyed watching it again 30 years later. My wife, at first, she's like, I don't remember if I saw this or not. And then as we were watching, I vividly remember several scenes in this. If we didn't see it together, then she would have seen it at some point. First time seeing it in the theater, second or third time seeing it just a few days ago. So, Addie, what about you? You already said you saw this when you were little, probably about 9 years old.
I can't remember exactly, but I know I was a kid, and whatever my sister would watch, I would end up watching too. My sister is 13 years older than me. I just remember specifically watching it again as a teenager, maybe like, let's say 13, 14, and being like, oh my God, Mark Wahlberg. I went through a Mark Wahlberg phase, and I watched it many times. We watched it again the other day, and we're just remembering like all the quotes, all the lines coming back like immediately as we're watching it. So I've definitely seen it quite a few times.
What's the first time you saw this one?
That's a good question. I really think it was a weekend rental from Blockbuster. Danny DeVito's in it, at least in our house at the time. We were big Danny DeVito fans. There was a lot going on, and it looked funny. That's why I'm curious about that trailer, because I have a hunch that it did a good job of making you want to see it. We'll talk about it a little later, but military comedies have always been something I've enjoyed just in general. So that might have been part of it too.
Yeah.
We saw it rental and loved it. Still love it. I still, there's a few things I'll still quote from it even to this day. It was on the list of movies that my wife had not seen when I first met her. She eventually was forced to sit and watch it because I said, you must watch this.
Yeah. And then Pat, when was the first time you saw it?
Yeah, I saw it pretty soon after it came out, and this was something that my folks wanted to see. And I think the three of us, I think my parents and I rented it one night. My siblings might have been a little bit young to watch it, but the three of us watched it within a year of it coming out once it was on rental. Needless to say, I liked the movie a whole lot. I've probably seen it a handful of times since then. I don't think it's been a one until this time, but I'll tell you, as I was watching through it, I'm like, I remember this scene. I remember this scene. I know exactly what they're going to say next. So saw it when it came out with the family, with my parents and rental, and we loved the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Addie, I did see you have a couple pages full of notes there, in good company, taking notes during the movie. I might let you kick it off here. One of the things I was going to ask, and maybe this is something that you had in your notes too, was Danny DeVito as a teacher. How well do you think he captures, if you think back to teachers you've had? When I think of some of Danny DeVito's roles, I think of him as being kind of this brash, abrasive type of character. This does seem a little bit of a different role for him. It starts that way, especially when he's in the line at the temp agency.
He's not exactly Louis De Palma in this. Is that?
But, I mean, he definitely softens as the movie goes along, and I think it's an interesting turn for him that you don't get in a lot of his other movies. Even now, characters that he plays are usually a little bit more sassy.
I think you're right about that. I don't think I've ever seen him, or at least in my memory, anything else where he's this kind of nice as a character. I grew up watching him in Matilda. Be all like in Taxi as well, but he was always brash. And so this one is surprising. He starts off that way, but it's funny in the line there. To get the job, that was really funny. But he's immediately nice to the kids. He's not nice to his own kid, but he's immediately nice to them. He doesn't treat them with any animosity. I guess he wants them to like him. Even though he doesn't necessarily want to be there, he treats them with a little bit more respect than they're used to.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I thought as I was watching this time around, having been such a long time since I'd seen this movie, that surprised me a bit was just how kind he came across. It seems like there's a series. I mean, you always kind of get a sense of when a movie is being created as a vehicle for somebody. You know, Robin Williams had Dead Poets Society. He had Good Morning Vietnam. It's very clear those movies were made for him to show off his abilities. You have a great director. You've got Penny Marshall in this. You've got a great combination of people. You've got a great combination of supporting actors, too. I remember my wife's comment was, they got everybody in this movie. It really feels like this movie was set up to be, let's do everything we can to give Danny DeVito his best shot at getting nominated for an Oscar. It's a vehicle for him to show his chops, what he's made of, and let him go from there. And some of the reviews I was reading online were, yeah, it's like a Dead Poets Society, but it just doesn't have the same heart. And I think even Roger Ebert gave this 1.5 stars. He's like, yeah, it's like these other inspirational teaching movies, just it doesn't have the feeling. And I'm watching the movie going, okay, so maybe he's not as charming as some of these other actors who have done similar movies, but at the same time, it's still a good movie. And he still comes across in many ways as being a pretty inspirational teacher.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I read the Roger Ebert review as well. I thought that was a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was very accurate. And things that I found entertaining or positive and uplifting, he just dismissed as another trope. I wanted to pick your brain for it. If you read the review, he said, and once again, we have a case where kids are inspired by high-level learning, but they don't have to do any of the work. It was something talking about how Shakespeare got them excited. And he was almost dismissive of that as like a trope, like implying that if these kids weren't educated, there's no way they could just be inspired by Shakespeare. That's the way I read it in his review. And I don't have the review in front of me, but I was kind of like, wow, I don't even know if that's accurate. I don't know. His review is, I think, harsh. It didn't accurately represent what the movie did. So.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think, you know, because I feel like, I mean, there is a series of movies, and I'm trying to think of the order that they would have been released in. Dead Poets Society is kind of the obvious one, where students are inspired by some higher level of learning. They've got the poetry. I've never been a teenage student at a New England prep school, but of the schools I've been to, I've never been in a group of students that have been so inspired by it that just became their entire life. So yes, it's a little bit of movie magic. And I feel like some are going to come later in the 90s. I'm kind of racking my brain to think about what he would have been referencing when he says that, because I'm not really sure. There might be some that are lesser known that I'm just not aware of. Later on, you're going to have Good Will Hunting, The Great Debaters, Freedom Writers, Dangerous Minds. I guess Stand and Deliver is early enough that he could have been referencing that. So you've got a bunch of movies that are going to come later. This and Dead Poets Society might have been the beginning of that kind of 90s, let's inspire the kids through great teachers series of movies that we got from that point on. I feel like this is kicking that off and moving into that realm.
Yeah, I don't know. To pan it seemed harsh. I think it was a movie with heart. Danny DeVito was great in it. Like you said, there was a huge cast in it. I thought they all did a good job. I found it an entertaining and heartwarming movie. If you're going to rip on the movie, you may as well open up the door and start yelling at the clouds. I mean, it's kind of like, why are we beating up the thing that's just trying to, you know, brighten people's lives?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Isn't that the headline in the Simpsons episode where they look at the newspaper? It's old man yells at clouds.
Yep, exactly.
And hey, you know what? Roger Ebert, he's no longer here with us now. So look what happened to him. He criticized the movie and he's dead.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Don't criticize movies anymore.
I know. That's Pat. That's why you don't yuck anybody's yum. Yeah.
I want my brakes to work when I step on the pedal.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, Addie, you have a whole series of notes there, so I want to be able to take advantage of that. What else did you want to say about it?
Isn't that supposed to be the point of the movie? You're not supposed to be this like high level student. You are making Shakespeare accessible to people, and like he's making them understand it. I can't say for sure, but I feel like that's what made me like Hamlet. I remember being excited to learn Hamlet when I went to high school, because I really like Hamlet, and that made it like digestible because Shakespeare is not the easiest to read or understand. And I think that's the whole point of the movie. And like you said, he's dead now, so whatever.
Yeah. That's what you get. And I remember trying to get that across when I was teaching English at the middle school. I remember when we would do Shakespeare plays, because I probably once a year would do a different Shakespeare play. That was one of the things that I always try to get across to my students. I was like, you know what? Don't worry if you don't understand every line they're saying. Try to understand the relationships. Try to understand the drama that's going on here, because Shakespeare, if nothing else, knows humans very, very well. He knows human nature very well. It's in language that is so descriptive and metaphorical. Even the people that would have gone to see Shakespeare's plays at the time, they wouldn't have, especially if you're not a wealthy noble back in the day, you're probably standing there, in the groundlings area, and you don't necessarily know what every line means either. But the idea is you're watching it, hearing it, you're watching it, which is a lot of times why I would tell my students, Shakespeare is not necessarily meant to be read. You can read it, but it's a totally different experience watching a movie versus sitting and reading the screenplay for a movie. And that's when you just read Shakespeare, which is why I always tried to show video clips, or we went to the Navy Pier Shakespeare Theater for field trips. Yes, we can sit in class and read the parts and take turns, but that's not really how Shakespeare was intended to be digested. If you take it the way it was meant to be, you get the human relationships, you get the human conflict. These characters are dealing with some of the same stuff you guys are dealing with, and that's usually what I would try to get across to my students is don't let the language get in your way. Look at the characters, look what they're doing, look what they're going through, look how they're arguing with each other, and that's the best way to understand Shakespeare. Some of the older teachers I used to have were very cut and dry. You sit, read it, understand it. I took 2 Shakespeare courses in college, and that's pretty much the way it was. It was read it, memorize it, understand it. It's not the way it was meant to be, but okay.
Yeah, every story, every movie is going to derive from that, whether consciously or not. Like, what is it? Is it The Lion King that's supposed to be Hamlet? Or it's something like that, right? It's Lion King that is Hamlet. But yeah, themes are going to be in every movie and TV show, so why not just pay attention to the source material?
And Shakespeare's so good at it, too. He has some of the best villains. When the one character in jail talks about reading Othello, like Othello, we're getting into what will ultimately be one of the 3 questions here in a little bit, but Othello was one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, and it's not one, I'm trying to think if I've ever actually seen it as a play. I remember seeing it and experiencing it for the first time as the Lawrence Fishburne movie. And I was like, oh, yes, this is Shakespeare. You got Lawrence Fishburne as Othello and Kenneth Branagh as Iago. I'm like, yep, this is how Shakespeare is meant to be experienced. But I also had the benefit of living in England for a little while, and my dad constantly taking us places. We went to Stratford-upon-Avon, and we saw Macbeth, and Derek Jacobi, one of the greatest modern stage actors and movie actors, was playing in Macbeth. We got to see it in Stratford-upon-Avon. And to have that kind of experience and get to see it as opposed to just read it, that makes all the difference. So when they have that scene in the movie where they take that field trip up to Canada to see the stage play, they might connect with it in the classroom, but that's when you're going to hook them. That's when you're going to understand that this is not just some 500-year-old story. This is good stuff. Especially them being in the military, there were certain things as they're watching the battle scene and some other stuff that's immediately connecting with them on a whole other level.
Yes.
Was there anything else about this one before we get into the 3 questions? Was there anything else we want to touch on for this? Oh, I'm going to throw something out there real quick, and then Addie, if you've got anything else, we'll dive into yours. The only part of the movie that I bumped on a little bit was his love interest. We are probably 90% of the way into the movie, and all of a sudden he's making some googly eyes with a staff sergeant, and in the next scene they're having a date at Burger King, and then they're an item. I'm like, okay. I like the pacing. I like how everything else is structured in this movie. That seems just completely shoehorned in at the last minute. And it seems like we have so many scenes that must have ended up on the cutting room floor because we jump from one scene to the date at Burger King, and they seem to be very familiar with each other. Once we get to the Burger King date, we must have edited a bunch of things to cut for time here because we missed a lot. At that point, I'm like, did you necessarily need to include?
Right. At that point, keep cutting it. Just cut out the whole relationship because you didn't need to have it.
And part of me felt bad. I was like, there's got to be some fun stuff in here. You want to humanize him even more, show him starting a relationship with this person, but show it. And if you're not going to show it, then maybe just cut it out. Otherwise, it just kind of seems awkward and truncated.
I was curious what you thought, John, you and Pat both, about the whole at the beginning. Well, you have a master's degree. Sure, you can teach. I thought that was amusing.
Bo, that hits kind of close to home with some meetings that I had today, along the lines of certain people being told, well, you work in a school, you could teach.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a question as a fellow IT professional. Would you look at people on your IT team and say, hey, you guys work in a school, you can teach? Thank you.
I suppose it might have to do with what are you asking them to teach?
No, it's your initial response is all I needed.
If they're teaching people how to log in, fine.
That would be phenomenal, wouldn't it?
I think it's very interesting when you see that, especially now where teaching shortage, sub shortage, and all this kind of stuff, trying to find any warm body to cover. Mm-hmm. What I've noticed a lot of too is, okay, you might be educated in this area. And I think we've had this conversation before where someone's really good at a thing, and this can be in school, this can be in the professional world, well, which is supposed to be school, but you know what I'm saying, real jobs. And it's like, you're good at a thing, so we're going to make you a manager and put you over people. Just because you're good at a thing doesn't necessarily make you good at leading people. Okay, I might be a crackerjack trumpet player and music teacher, band director. I'm not. I might be. But let's say, okay, let's give Pat a promotion. Let's make him department chair. Does that really make sense? I might be really good at teaching band, but does that make me good at leading a group of individuals? And I think that's what sometimes get missed. Oh, well, you have a master's degree in whatever. But does that mean you can teach kids or lead people? Or does that just make you really good at working in IT? Reading a book about leadership from someone that was a Navy SEAL talked about that. Putting someone in command of other SEALs or other soldiers or Marines or sailors, that's okay, but they might not necessarily be a great leader just because they're an expert on whatever weapon system they got promoted from, right? Do you get what I'm saying? So I think that's the link that gets lost. And in fact, I'm going way off on the deep end with this one, but just this year, we for cross country, Dennis, our other co-host, and we have a new assistant coach, phenomenal teacher. Totally into fitness, excited, loves working with the kids. But it was a really steep learning curve because in her mind, it was like, oh, we're going to be coaching cross country. So it's going to be sort of like when you go to a fitness class at the gym and everyone's organized and doing the exercises the right way and they listen to the coach. Or it's going to be like my classroom where I used to 20 kids come in, they all sit down at their desks and listen. And having a cross country team of 93 kids between the ages of 10 and 13, they all don't listen well. And it's like to say that just because you know about a thing makes you good at teaching a thing. Do you get what I'm saying? There's a learning curve there. That's all I'm going to throw back at John's question. But
and the last comment I will make, and then I want to give Addie an opportunity before we wrap up to share anything else she wants to share about it, is I would have also liked to have seen more of his advertising background show up in his teaching. Like once we get that ad scene at the beginning, it seems like he's got some ideas. They do say he's been slipping in recent years and his quality of work is not what it used to be. I would have liked to have seen him try to use some of his ad writing experience or advertising experience. Like I would have liked to have seen some trial and error in his teaching. Like, I remember being in high school, I was in an English class, let me do what my teachers used to do. And then that fails, which I think is what he tries to do at first. And then I would have loved him to be like, okay, well, now what do I know? Okay, I know advertising. Let me try advertising. And then he tries that, and then that fails. And as he's given up and he's just sitting there reading the book one day, then that's when the kid's like, hey, what are you reading? And then he starts to tell him about it, and it's because it's something he's passionate about. Might not have been what he was professionally trained to do, But that's where he moves from, okay, I tried it this way, it failed. I tried it this way, it failed. Now let me try something I'm passionate about. Let me connect with these kids this way. And then whoop, we're off to the races. And that's what sticks. My only two criticisms of the movie are I probably would have either included more of the love interest relationship scenes and either include more or take it out completely. And I would have loved to have seen more of his advertising background come into his teaching attempts. Otherwise, solid movie. Really loved it.
I gotta love when Shakespeare's what gets them going, and then suddenly Danny DeVito has that great bit of comedy where he throws that look. He goes, Shakespeare. Go figure. Like, who would have thought? And it's just so human. It's so real. I mean, I love the way he handles that.
Yeah.
And
I agree about the love story.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, me. Yeah, no, I like the love story. It's nice that he ended up with somebody, but I can see that they didn't develop it at all. It's just all of a sudden he's like, this is my girlfriend. Like, so I can see that they need to be developed. Another thing I wanted to bring up, just because it's the one line that will always stick in my head and we still quote it, is the oxymoron. This is the best ever.
You can't do that. You're not allowed to pick on us like that.
I ain't no oxymoron.
No. Yeah, see, when I mentioned it to my mother that we watched it, she's like, oh, isn't that the one where, well, what's the word? What does he say? Oxymoron? So it's like it sticks in your head. So, yeah, that's funny. My takeaway from watching it with more of a critical eye is that he learns from them as much as they learn from him. He's not even wanting to be there at the beginning, and it shows because then he kind of gives up on them when he was late that one time. And they feel like, oh, you're just another one that doesn't actually care. He does the whole tower thing just to win them back, and then realizes that he needs to be a part of the army life as much as they need to be a part of his teaching, and they kind of all learn together, which I thought was really nice. And yeah, I mean, I do like the whole Shakespeare of it all.
All right. Before we jump into 3 questions and everybody teaches us, we're just going to teach a lesson on our 3 question answers here. I didn't tell you guys that ahead of time, but congratulations. You can teach now. No, go ahead.
Can I say one thing real quick? Just one point I want to bring up. And I think, and again, I am not an expert in it. I want to be very clear. I've never served a day in the military. But I find it interesting seeing how the military is portrayed in this film. We did A Few Good Men, and these are some of the first movies showing the military post Desert Storm. And I find it interesting because when we were looking in the 80s, it was always like the super soldier or universal soldier. Or if it was a more accurate, realistic one, it was kind of talking about Vietnam. The way things were portrayed in there is either the in the trenches view and the struggle that was there, or the idea that the government higher ups let them down or something like that. This is interesting because this is a different portrayal of the military, almost kind of in a post-Vietnam sense, right? Like, I mean, what Vietnam, when this had come out, had only ended like not even 20 years before. So there's a good chance that some of the older officers had served in Vietnam. I found it interesting because like what you're seeing is the depictions of an army that's not like a draft army, but people that volunteered. I don't find it heavy-handed at all, but they kind of give voice to who's volunteering for the army, and they talk about how they needed it or how they wanted to get away, or the one guy that ended up being a good guy and a good soldier, we thought was a drug dealer trying to escape from something. I found that portrayal interesting. The whole idea, like when the Kadeem Hardison character is like, well, you can't call me that. You're not allowed to this, or this, was a newer thing than what we see when we watch Full Metal Jacket and the way boot camp was portrayed in there. I referenced that one scene earlier where there was that back and forth. This is 20 years after Vietnam, and you have the voice of someone that had been protesting the war, and this was my military service. And then the voice of someone that probably had to go over there, whatever his belief was, he had to go over and serve. Did you remember his name? I just think so much, especially in the mid-90s, that was a discussion point in our house. That exact debate, discussion, I mean, that was something that in my house growing up, that was a constant bit of discussion. And I just think that this movie captured it so well. And it's very, from what we've seen up until this point, is a unique and more of a newer perspective on the military, right? I guess I should mention Forrest Gump, but even that portrayal was of something that was 30 years before the 90s, right? I found it a very unique, interesting, and insightful portrayal of the military.
Well, and not that you don't have some lighthearted portrayals of the military in the 80s, but when you think about military movies from the 80s, you're looking at Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, Empire of the Sun, Red Dawn, Hamburger Hill. Yeah, I mean, it's so many, and they're so heavy because you're so close to Vietnam at that point. That was still in the filmmakers' minds. Like, that's still what they had to say about the military at that point. And then I feel like you get some of that in Good Morning Vietnam because it has its lighthearted moments, but at the same time, there are some heavy bits in there as well. But yeah, I think you do start to get a kinder and gentler Army portrayed in the mid-90s once we get to this point. I feel like, and again, not that you didn't have them in the 80s, but I do feel like you might get a little bit more military comedies in the 90s. I do feel like that was kind of a newer thing.
Well, and also we were peacetime then. Gulf War,
by 94,
you know. Yeah, I mean, the Gulf War was, you know, a resounding success to its goals. And I mean, like, I think Danny DeVito even makes a comment to that. And leading up before that, the last war had been Vietnam. Now, you had the incidents that were like the Battle of Mogadishu, the Black Hawk Down incident. I think that was 93 when you're seeing those terrible images with that. But again, you look at that, we just talked about True Lies. You think about the way terrorism was portrayed in that. We didn't quite have that same look 6 years later. So I think that's kind of the piece too. You're seeing a peacetime army, one that was drawing down in some ways after the Cold War, but also taking a look at not being a Vietnam story and showing a different side. I might be incredibly off base. It's just my opinion watching movies and talking to people that serve. But my gosh, if we have any of our listeners that do serve, thank you. And feel free to set me straight if I've got something off in that. But it's just a different portrayal of the military.
Yeah. Addie, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share before we jump into 3 questions?
No, I don't think so. I just want to mention Lilo Brancato. His interactions are hilarious. Oh yeah. Of like Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, he's hilarious.
Yeah. Does he goes into a little bit of a raging bull thing at one point?
Yeah.
It is time for 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. And I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, question number 1. What is your favorite military comedy TV show or movie?
This is difficult.
I'm sorry, not sorry.
So I'm going to reject your question and give you 2. I'm fairly confident no one else will
always treat these questions with the utmost respect and somehow at the same time complete disdain. I will not answer that stupid question.
Go ahead, Bo.
I'm going to pick one from the Army and one from the Navy.
Go Navy.
Navy, Down Periscope.
Okay.
Kelsey Grammer, Lauren Holly. And then Army.
Great choice.
The classic Bill Murray vehicle, Stripes.
There you go.
Because how can you ever go wrong with Stripes?
No. Addie, what have you got for this one?
I actually had to look up a list because I had nothing. So I put in the Army now, but I don't really remember that. I mean, I remember it at the time. And then I put Hogan's Heroes with my father watch. Ultimately, it's going to be Renaissance Man.
Well played. Well
Ultimately,
played.
it's going to be Renaissance Man.
Great choices.
Patrick, I'm going to need you to contain your answer to less than half an hour.
I will do what I can. Here's my problem. Bo and Addie took so many good choices. John, I might need to pull that move at the restaurant with the big menu. You go first, and then I'll have to go. Hogan's Heroes is one of the great all-time comedies. Boy, you mentioned Down Periscope. I'm going to be racking my brains as I try to figure. Let me think it through. Let me really think it through. You go first before I cede my time to you. I'll just say the movie Pearl Harbor, and then that'll be my placeholder until I get my real answer.
Yes, your military comedy. Well, my answer for this is obvious, so I'm not going to be able to.
On the record, not because of the subject matter, but because of the treatment of the subject matter. I just want to be very clear to all of our people who haven't heard my rant about that movie.
Correct. Yeah.
So definitely not about the subject matter.
My answer for this one is obvious. A very close runner-up would be because we were watching this constantly on reruns when I was growing up. And every time my dad would call my grandmother, he would start out with his best impersonation of Gomer Pyle because she hated that he would use that voice every time. Growing up, anytime it was Nick at Night or whatever the reruns were on TV, it was always Gomer Pyle. It was always on at one point. So I'm going to have that as my very close runner-up to favorite military comedy. Yes, I do. And
surprise.
I'm going to follow that up with what my obvious answer is. Why do you call your daughter Linda Bird? Because Linda Dog would be too cruel. Easy, girl. Easy. You know, if you pick him up by the ears, it doesn't hurt him as much.
He's on a roll.
I know. Once I get started, it's like Pringles. Me and Good Morning Vietnam is like Pringles. You can't stop with just one. So it's Good Morning Vietnam. There are a couple of others. If I was going to do any runners up, there's always been a special goofy place in my heart for the movie Three Kings. I do have a lot of fun with that movie. I think I watched it way too many times when it first came out. I'll throw that one in there as a possibility too. Pat, I've done everything I can to stall for you just a little bit.
I think I'm going to go with Hot Shots.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm going to go with Hot Shots. And it's funny because I'm like, now I think I should go to a list and just try and cram at the last second. But you know what? I got to go with my gut reaction. And the list you guys mentioned, fantastic shows, movies. I'd have to say Hot Shots is definitely
Hot Shots or Hot Shots Part 2?
Yes.
As
they are
just like with The Godfather, when they box it together as the Hot Shots saga.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, Hot Shots is just, there's so many great scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hot Shots Part 2 has so many great scenes. But that end when he goes in and it's the kill count.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still just can't watch that without having to stop because I'm crying because it's just, yeah, Hot Shots Part 2.
Agreed.
Or Hot Shots. Yeah, those that have to be, after Hogan's Heroes and then the rest.
What is your favorite Shakespeare play you learned in school?
So the learned in school part.
This really benefits me because I learned all of them in school.
What am I supposed to do with that?
What'd you learn in school? Was it Romeo and Juliet?
We learned a couple of them in school. None of them happened to be my favorite. That's why I'm curious.
What's your favorite Shakespeare play?
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Oh, okay. All right.
But if you would talk about school, then I have to think Hamlet or Macbeth, and it complicates things.
Okay.
Unnecessarily.
You've been super chill today, so I don't want to complicate anything about what you got going on there, Bo. I want you to just rest in whatever it is you're enjoying. I don't want to break up Bo's chill.
Rock on.
All right. Addie, what about you? You've already stated a couple of times that you're a big Shakespeare fan.
I mean, I don't want to come off as smarter than I am, but
that's okay. Addie, we do it all the time.
In high school, we learned one each year. We learned Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night's Dream, Macbeth, and Hamlet. Romeo and Juliet is a standard, but it's going to be Hamlet. I really enjoy Hamlet. I was excited to learn it, and then we went to go see the play, and that was probably one of the best plays I've seen. It was just so well done. So Hamlet will always be it. For me, and Romeo and Juliet is just the standard. It's always good.
Are you a fan of the Kenneth Branagh Hamlet?
I haven't seen that one, but I'd like to. I think I watched
he's a good one.
Guildenstern are dead.
Oh yeah.
Love that one.
Yeah, whenever you get a chance to, definitely go check out the Kenneth Branagh Hamlet. Like that is top shelf of his different Shakespeare movies. I think that one and Othello are my two favorites.
Cool.
Patrick, you got some splaining to do.
I've got Julius Caesar.
Ah.
I think it was the first Shakespeare that I read. There was a time, and I guess it's still true to some extent. I'm fascinated reading about the Roman Empire and the history. That play kind of captured my imagination. I remember reading Hamlet. I think we went to production of Romeo and Juliet, and then the movie came out. I really liked a lot of it, but I would say Julius Caesar was my favorite. The problem with the tragedies are I always want them to like not, I want it to be successful. I want the happy ending. Do you know what I'm saying? So that was always my problem with it. But yeah, that was my favorite in school.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
I come to praise Caesar.
I come here to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
That's what it is.
The evil that men do lives off to them. The good is often interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar.
One of the greatest political speeches right there.
I believe I have told this story before, but when we moved back from England and I was in 8th grade in Southwest Missouri farm town, in our speech class that we had to take, like a speech and debate class, one of the final projects was to take something, a song, a poem, or whatever, and memorize it. And then you had to get up and recite it in front of the class. So we had a bunch of the Southwest Missouri kids who had some issues with their R's and their G's, getting up and talking. That was kind of the way it was. And here I was, little British boy, who was going to school in their school for a year, and I still had a little bit of an accent. The speech teacher let everybody pick what they wanted. Some kids picked song lyrics and they recited the song, Seuss or Shel Silverstein, because they figured, well, that's easy. It's a poem. It rhymes. I was the nerdy 8th grade kid that picked Mark Antony's speech from Julius Caesar. To paraphrase a line from Star Trek The Next Generation, there was no grade to fit the excitement that I brought the speech teacher at that point. I think just the fact that I chose that, she immediately was like, A+.
Mm-hmm.
A+.
He knew what it was.
And then I remember reciting it. The other kids in class were like, what is he saying? So.
Dude, that's awesome. You come in and you're receiving that Mark Antony speech. That is an awesome flex.
I feel like one of the kids before me did a song from the Wayne's World soundtrack as his recitation. Yeah. And then another kid was like, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. This one's got a little car. This one's got a little star. And then I get up there and I'm like, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The good that, yeah.
That is beyond awesome.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say, when that teacher found out, because she was also the high school speech and debate teacher, when she found out that I was leaving to move to Chicago at the end of that year, she wept. She was like, oh, I had one chance to get a kid on the speech and debate team that maybe we could do something with. So.
Poor thing.
Not too many kids in Farmtown with British accents, so it worked in my favor.
You don't say.
Favorite Shakespeare play I learned in school. My cheating answer to this is all of them. But my favorites, I mentioned it earlier, Othello is probably one of my favorites. In terms of movies, I think Othello is my favorite. The Lawrence Fishburne Othello is one of my favorite movies. The Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet is amazing. Did they do, let's see, they were in the middle of making, or maybe right after they finished making The Avengers, and they did the black and white, was it Macbeth?
Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh, yes, that's right. It was Much Ado About Nothing.
Love that.
And that was a great version of that one, too. I think Othello, of all the different plays, I think Othello is probably my favorite. I do love Julius Caesar. I have a hard time narrowing it down. That's definitely not a short list for me. Question 3, speaking of short lists, what is your favorite Danny DeVito role?
This is tough, but I think I got to go with Twins. The way he and Arnold play off each other, but I think it's just fantastic. I've always loved that movie.
We're going to daily double that then, because I'm going with Twins as well. So basically, we could be twins with our choices. Yeah.
Our wives.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Matilda, just because I grew up with that that movie. He did
Nice.
direct that as well. He did a good job.
Oh, he did. Oh, that's
But
awesome.
that's the one that's going to stick in my mind.
Patrick.
I might have to daily triple it. I really like him in Twins. For the sake of variety, I really love him in Get Shorty. I love everything about that movie. I love his character in there. I love the way it's played and all that. I also like him in The Rainmaker. Wait, The Rainmaker, right? Wasn't he the paralegal?
Yeah, he was in that.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's LA Confidential. He's great. in that. You know what? Here's the problem. Now I got to list everything. Twins has got to be at the top, and then I'd say Get Shorty. And how can you not like him in Taxi?
Well, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we already mentioned the character. He's just so fun, and
Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's great.
Yeah.
As a kid, we watched Throw Mama from the Train several times, and I always loved him in that one.
Yeah. My grandmother, she would choose the strangest things to be offended by. Southern woman from Kentucky. Something about the title of that movie just rubbed her the wrong way.
Oh.
Just the discussion of the movie would make her bristle. Dude, she was an odd duck. What can I say?
She would have preferred Throw Mama from the Locomotive.
Fair. That's fair. That's well done. Well played, sir.
Yes. That's okay. My mother-in-law does not like the song Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. So
I remember telling you this. It was funny. My grandmother loved it.
okay.
Like I said, she chose the strangest.
It's fine. It's a different strokes for different folks.
Indeed.
So, yeah. All right. Did I say mine? I don't think I said. No, I said mine. We were part of the Daily Triple with Twins. All right. That is it for 3 questions. Before we wrap up, very, very quickly, again, visit our website, 30podcast.com. We are at 30podcast on most of the different social media spots there. If you want to leave a voicemail, if you have some thoughts on any of the movies we've talked about, including Renaissance Man, you can feel free to leave a voicemail for us on our voicemail line. Just go to the website, and there's a little button down in the corner that looks like a phone or a microphone. We have got some other great movies coming up. This month has been our work-life balance month. Our Patreon episode is The River from 1984. Our Patreon short is The Ref from 1994. Last week we did Clerks. This week is Renaissance Man. Next week we'll be doing The Paper.
Looking forward to seeing that again.
Oh, as someone who almost went into journalism, I watched that movie, and it's kind of like the Dead Poet Society. If you were to stick me as a teenager in a room and make me watch The Paper and Dead Poet Society, I would be like Amadeus in the movie Amadeus. It's like, they're so beautiful. Why can't I just have 2 heads? So I love that movie.
That movie's so good.
Yeah. And we're going to finish the month off with It Could
I
Happen.
have never heard of this movie.
Michael Keaton is a newspaper reporter, and Marissa Tomei is in it. There's a ton of great actors in this movie.
I am a little worried that I've hyped it up so much, but it's not going to hold up. So I'm crossing my fingers on this one.
It'll hold up. Don't worry about it.
You're very good.
I'm supremely confident. I think it'll hold up for you.
All right.
Yeah. In fact, I was watching it the other day, and I was going through a little thing of like, do I still enjoy the work that I'm doing now? Would I like to try something else? And I'm watching this movie. I'm going, that looks really stressful, but a different kind of stressful. Could be fun. No, I have not seen it in many years as well, and we watched it last week, and I was like, yep, it definitely holds up.
All right. Good stuff.
Before we go, so Addie, it has been so wonderful to have you here with us. Thank you so much for supporting the show. We appreciate it so much, and it was so much fun to have you on and to have you talking about a movie that you love. I have a couple of last questions for you. It's not part of the 3 questions. What episode have you listened to so far that has been your favorite?
I thought he was going to ask what is
Oh
your
my
quest?
God. I listened to so many.
What is your quest? Followed by what is your favorite color?
Good.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm bad on the spot, but
Oh, that's okay.
I've listened to so many, and there's so many that I've downloaded that I want to watch the movie for the first time so I can listen to the podcast. You guys are inspiring me to watch more movies.
Is there one that is either, I kind of gave you a list of what's going on for the rest of this year, but is there a movie coming up that, so we haven't released our lists for 95 or beyond yet. Is there a movie coming up in the mid to late 90s that you're like, I am super excited for this one? Like one that we have not covered yet, but will within the next.
I saw the list for 95, and there's a lot of good ones on there, but the one that I'm thinking of is 96. And It's not the greatest in terms of theme, but I think is one of the best movies I've seen. It's Sleepers.
Good choice.
I can say right now that one will definitely be one that we cover in 96. Thank you so much. While we've got you here, is there anything, last thoughts, anything you want to plug, anything you want to share?
I love your podcast. You guys are fellow nerds. I love listening to you talk. I think it'll make you all happy that I'm working my way through Star Wars for the first time. So be proud.
Nice. Oh, so,
That's
so
super
for the first
exciting.
time?
Well, and I've got a follow-up question. First of all, Eddie, thank you so much for the support and being here talking about the movie. That was fantastic. But I've got a follow-up question. How are you watching the Star Wars movies? Are you doing the release order, chronological order? What's your system for watching Star Wars?
I'm doing release order. So I did 4, 5, 6, and 1 so far.
Nice.
Outstanding.
That is, I'm always happy to hear when somebody is experiencing those for the first time. That'll be outstanding. I think in terms of the numbered movies, you will enjoy all 8 of them.
I've heard varying things. People don't like the 7, 8, 9.
John has his moments too. Don't you worry about that.
If you listen, Kelsey, you notice our illustrious host will not even acknowledge the existence of a 9th movie.
There was a 9th movie? Did I miss it?
No, John. Happy Place. Happy Place.
Okay.
You're all good.
I'm very sorry.
If I can make a recommendation, an impassioned plea, once you get through the movies, I can't say enough about the animated. Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch are incredible stories, and it's eye-opening how much story they tell with basically a kid's cartoon and how emotionally you get involved in the story. So again, I can't say enough good stuff about the animated.
Well,
if you're looking for things to watch.
And my comment to piggyback on that is they trick you into thinking it's a kid's cartoon.
True.
Okay.
They're very good. They're all amazing.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We've got some great movies coming up over the next couple weeks, and we're getting close to the end of the year here. So I think very, very shortly, we are going to be releasing our schedule for next year. We'll be sharing what we're doing for the first month or so of 95. Got a fun slate of movies shared with Pat, Bo, Jeff, and Dennis what the upcoming year is going to look like. We're going to do a couple of special things because this will be our 10th anniversary year. Once a month, as part of our 10th anniversary, we're going to revisit a movie we've done at some point in the 10-year run of the podcast. Bo, I think some of the ones you were choosing was ones you weren't able to be on the recordings for, so you wanted to have that be part of your list. Some of mine were ones that maybe when we watched it before, we were either kind of indifferent to, or ones that maybe we didn't enjoy or thought we didn't enjoy. I wanted to give them like a second chance and kind of see what was going on with that. Pat chose violence when he chose his movies.
Which one, the first or the second batch?
I didn't look at a second batch. I saw your first selections that you put down, and I thought, wow, Pat woke up and chose violence today.
I have updated the list.
You have? Okay. All right. I feel a little bit better now because I didn't want to have to hurt you. So we got some fun stuff coming up next year. Once a month, we'll do a kind of a 10th anniversary rewatch of movies that we've covered up to this point. So looking forward to that. We don't typically put out the entire year all at once. We do it a month at a time. I will say more than other years, as I divvied these up into different topics for each of the months, I'm really having a hard time finding a month where there isn't like a strong slate of movies in that month. Like sometimes we get to December and it's like, here's what was left. But no, as I was going through the 1995 movies, I was like, wow, this is like, I can't find a month that we've organized these into where I'm like, yeah, this is maybe a little bit of a low month for the podcast. Nope. Every single month has some pretty big bangers going on. So really excited for next year. Once again, Addie, thank you so much for being here. It was so much fun to get to know you a little bit more, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. Thank you so much for supporting the show, for listening to the show.
Thank you. This has been great.
We always say we love to get to know people.
Agreed.
Especially have people on the show and hear more about the movies you love, because we listen to ourselves talk all the time. It's more interesting for us to hear about the stuff you love.
Sorry, you cut off completely, and I keep going. It's like connection right now.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
I really enjoyed it. Like I said, you guys, you're probably one of my favorite podcasts, so I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's great podcasting with you.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Come on back here next week. We'll be talking about The Paper, and stop the presses. We'll be talking about The Paper. In the meantime, be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we will see you back here next time.
Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock, they're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can choose, even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast, some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood that.